Welcome everyone. It is 12:01, so we want to get started. My name is Usher, and I'm at the University of Kentucky, and I have some devoted students around me today, devoted especially because the UK game starts in 59 minutes, and everyone is sitting here at this table, so pretty impressive. But we're really fortunate to welcome you all to the first ever Division 15 webinar. I, along with Serena Shim, who's in the room, am co-chair of the Graduate Affairs Committee of Division 15 of APA, and it's the first time we've tried something of this sort, and we're very grateful to have some special guests with us to talk to you today about the writing process. Just a few things, introductory items as we get started. First, I just wanted to let you know that we do have a Graduate Affairs Committee in Division 15. And our job is to organize events that will help graduate students in the division develop as scholars. We offer a doctoral student mentoring seminar at the APA convention and a number of other APA-related programming events at the convention for graduates. They're open to all graduate students, and we hope you'll partake of those if you haven't done so already. We also have a couple of award opportunities that the Graduate Student Affairs Committee puts on. Those are the Dissertation Research Award to help, I think, up to $1,000 to help with dissertation research, and the Paul Pentrich Dissertation Award, which is given after the dissertation has been defended.
My name is Serena Shim, and I'm a co-chair with the Ellen, and we're hosting this seminar, and we're very excited, and thank you so much for joining us today. We have two wonderful panelists, and I'm very excited to hear what they have to say about academic writing process. I started reading their vidas yesterday and haven't finished yet, as they are simply too long. I'm sure that many of you are already familiar with their work, as both of them are leading researchers in the field of motivation and self-regulated learning. Yet let me provide a brief introduction of our panelists. Dr. Anastasia Kitsantas is a professor and the director of PhD in education at George Mason University. She previously held positions at James Madison and Florida State before she joined George Mason. Her research focuses on social cognitive processes and self-regulated learning in academic, sports, and health-related settings. She is the lead author of her book, Learning to Learn with Integrative Learning Technologies, a practical guide for academic success. She published 68 peer-reviewed articles, 11 book chapters, and a number of reports. She is a sought-after speaker of many national and international organizations. She holds a fellow status with APA Division 15 and has won many prestigious awards such as APA Division 15 Outstanding Dissertation Award and GMU Outstanding Teaching Award. Dr. Kaplan is an associate professor at Temple University and is currently serving as an editor-in-chief for the Journal of Experimental Education. Before joining the faculty at Temple University, Abi taught at Ben-Gurion University in Israel. Abi's research focuses on motivation, self-regulation, and identity development in educational contexts. He published 40 peer-reviewed articles, 17 book chapters, and 6 invited commentaries and numerous reports. As a guest editor, he edited special issues for highly respected journals such as Educational Psychologist, Contemporary Educational Psychology, and Journal of Experimental Education. In addition to his uncanny productivity as a researcher, he is also a recipient of Temple University Outstanding Service Award and Ben-Gurion University Outstanding Teaching Award. Anastasia and Abi have much to share today for us. They both have been very successful securing external grants for their research. They have been serving on editorial boards for many journals and thus very familiar with inner workings of various journals in educational psychology. On a personal side, when not working, Anastasia likes to take a long walk while Abi does 9th grade algebra and biology homework. He's going to take an SAT in a couple of years. We're very lucky to have them today, given their extremely busy schedule. Please join me welcoming Drs. AK and AK.
Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. My name is Anastasia Kitsantas, and along with my co-presenter, Avi Kaplan, we are very excited to be presenting today. Let me begin by thanking Drs. Usher, Serena, Shim, and the Division 15 Communications Director, Wade George, for inviting us to participate in this session and all their hard work for organizing this event. I hope what we have to say about academic writing will be of interest and use to some of you. So let's begin. As you can see, academic writing is a very demanding task, which requires work day in, day out. Writers work under lonely conditions, with often unsatisfactory output, and are constantly revising this output to meet their goals. Thus, quality writing requires high levels of self-discipline. So let me give you an outline of this two-part brief presentation that Avi and I will engage in. First, I am going to talk about how proficient writers engage in self-regulation, and then my colleague Dr. Kaplan will concentrate on the second part, which focuses on successful publishing in academia. So high quality writing requires high levels of self-regulation. In fact, highly competent writers rely extensively on self-regulatory techniques or strategies to enhance their writing performance, such as setting goals, self-monitoring, and self-evaluating. However, becoming a proficient writer involves more than acquiring knowledge of content and use of strategies. It depends on high levels of self-motivation, because writing activities, as my mentor, Professor Zimmerman, states, are usually self-planned, self-initiated, and self-sustained. So what is self-regulation of writing? According to Zimmerman and Schunk, self-regulation of writing is defined lexically as self-initiated thoughts, feelings, and actions that writers use to attain various writing goals, such as enhancing the quality of the text they're creating, in other words, engaging in revision. So how do successful writers then self-regulate their writing? These expert writers self-regulate through using a variety of strategies: goal setting, self-recording, strategy use, and cycles of revision. So these self-regulatory strategies or processes are embedded within this three-phase model that you see on your screen, which is derived from research on self-regulation in diverse areas of functioning, such as athletics, sports, health, and so forth. It includes motivational beliefs as well as cognitive processes in a cyclical feedback loop, wherein writing outcomes are used to modify and guide subsequent efforts to write. In the first phase, the forethought phase, which sets the stage for efforts to self-regulate, competent writers focus on goal setting, strategic planning, and also display positive motivational beliefs, such as high self-efficacy to write and writing interest. During the performance phase, writers seek to enhance their writing activities by using strategies and self-monitoring their progress. Finally, in the last phase, the self-reflection phase, writers seek to enhance their understanding of outcomes and to adapt future methods of learning. Thus, note now the cyclical nature of this model. So let's talk a little bit more about some of these key self-regulatory processes. Good writers in the forethought phase they begin by meticulous planning. Prior to performing, expert writers engage in strategic planning, which involves setting specific writing goals, such as daily or weekly word counts or page completion goals, and also choosing systematic methods for organizing, producing, and transforming written texts. So take a look at the examples of the product you're interested in writing. Articles like those published in journals in educational psychology, other doctoral dissertations that your peers have produced, successful grant proposals. Read all those models and ask yourself, how are they structured? What is my timeline? How will I plan to get the product done on time? Good writers set specific process-oriented and measurable goals in the forethought phase. Remember the first phase of the three-phase model. As you set those goals, focus your attention initially on learning processes and then shift to learning outcomes. Because remember, process-oriented goals are controllable. Outcome goals are not. For example, outline the main sections and subsections of the paper and compare those sections with other articles published in other educational psychology journals. Do not focus on the length of the manuscript yet. Write every day and monitor the extent to which you're achieving your goals. Just focus on writing. Multitasking rarely works for regular journal article writing. Ensure that you will have sufficient uninterrupted periods to write. Early morning hours work the best, at least for me. Manage your writing time to prevent burnout by setting limits on daily writing goals. In my case, I can't write more than 2 hours a day. That's kind of my limit. Good writers are persistent, thick-skinned, and self-efficacious. In fact, highly self-regulated writers depend on their motivational beliefs, particularly the perceptions of self-efficacy. Your self-efficacy can make the difference. If you don't believe in yourself and your capacity to achieve, then no matter how hard you try, you'll end up failing. So your self-efficacy should be at an all-time high, always, always. You should write with friends who can increase your self-efficacy and can inspire you. As many of you might know, we all have to overcome rejections from journals before our work is accepted. Dr. Kaplan will tell you later that more than 80% of the articles submitted to the journal he's editing, the Journal of Experimental Education, are rejected. Thus, do not get discouraged. Keep going. Keep writing. Good writers, now in the performance phase, use task strategies, structure their environment, and monitor their progress. Use of task strategies such as the use of outlines, mnemonics, or metaphors are designed to enable writers to reduce the complexity of the writing task and carry it out more effectively. There also, writers use self-instruction where you read aloud drafts to appraise your output. This strategy works very well for me. Many writers also use environmental structuring to select, organize, and create effective writing settings. For example, my preference would be to write in a small, quiet room with a desk away from any windows or distractions. Keeping track of your progress and how well your strategies are working is also critical because you can easily get overwhelmed by the amount of information. Good writers are self-reflective, set reasonable standards, react positively to outcomes, and are open to feedback. I would like to emphasize that Competent writers engage in self-evaluation and react positively to outcomes, no matter what. View writing as the continuing process of growth. Unplug and simply set aside time to think and write. Ask yourself, what are you doing? How you should be doing, and what are your next goals? Good writers also learn through collaboration with experts. I learned how to write academic papers by observing and emulating, and I'm emphasizing emulating, my mentor for many, many years. He was and still is the best source of inspiration for me. My advice to you will be collaborate with your mentor and professors. Assist with data collection. Assist with material development. Assist with literature reviews. Assist with data analysis, with implications of the project. Assist with the revisions of the paper. In summary, present and publish with your mentors. You will need extensive social guidance and social support as an aspiring writer. Take their advice, whether it's solicited or not, and write every single day. Writing should be your priority no matter what. So thank you for your attention, and I will now pass the torch to my esteemed colleague, Dr. Kaplan, who will be talking about writing and publishing. Thank you.
Thank you, Anastasia. I'm going to focus on publishing in journals. It builds on what Anastasia emphasized in the forethought stage, the important process of deciding what it is, what is your product. When we do academic writing, we write many different things. We write papers for class, we write proposal for the proposal for our dissertation, we write conference proposals, we write papers for conferences, we write our dissertation. In academia, we write articles for publication, we write reports, we write grant proposals. There are many different kinds of products, and when you think about sitting down to write, you should have a clear image of what is the product that you're going to produce. Now, when you're writing journal articles, there are different kinds of articles, and there are different kinds of outlets. It's a very important part when thinking about writing to publish an article to imagine what it is that you're trying to publish. What is the nature of the article, and which is the journal that will be the best home for your product. On the screen, there are 4 journals that are relevant to educational psychology. The Journal of Experimental Education, Contemporary Educational Psychology, American Educational Research Journal, and Journal of Ed Psych. There are others, of course, and that's one thing to remember, that there are many journals that can be home to educational psychology manuscripts. But all of these journals have different emphases. So one of the things that is extremely important is to get familiar with the different journals. Read the mission statements of the journals. Read recently published articles of these journals. Pay attention to what kind of research is published there. What kind of methodologies are represented in these articles. What kind of research questions the authors who have published in these journals ask. Finding the journal that fits your study is a very, very important first step. Clearly, it's not only one journal that may fit your study, and there's some decision making that one can do about choosing the best journal that we will talk about later in the question and answer stage. But in terms of the emphasis at this point is get familiar with the journals, talk to your mentors, what they know about these journals, Also, if you have hesitation or you're not sure, send the abstract to the editor and ask, does this fit in this journal? What you want is when you start writing to have the kind of product that you're aiming for up front. The second very, very important thing to understand when writing for publication or for any other academic writing that is going to be vetted and reviewed is to have your audience in mind. Successful publishing is all about audience awareness. It's not enough to have a good idea. It's crucial to be able to communicate it effectively. So imagine when you're writing a manuscript that you intend to send to publication, who's going to read it? And these are the people you're writing for. They are the gatekeepers. They are the ones who need to evaluate that your manuscript has merit. So having the reviewers in mind, the reviewers and the editor in mind is highly important. Role play. Imagine yourself in the role of a reviewer, and in fact, don't just role play. Seek opportunities to review. Talk to your advisors and see if you can join them in reviewing manuscripts that they are asked to peer review for journals. Seek opportunities to be a graduate student reviewer for conferences or for journals. There are some journals that provide such opportunities for graduate students. The more you review other people's manuscripts, the more you understand what counts as a quality manuscript. You are gaining incredibly valuable information by reviewing other people's work. And you actually are then able to imagine better how a reviewer may look at your own paper. So what you want is not to have somebody scratching their head when they're reading your manuscript. You want them to flow with your argument and understand immediately and easily that your manuscript is worthwhile, the study is worthwhile, and that it's well written. So when you imagine effective communication, particularly in educational psychology and writing for journals, what would be good strategies? And I want to offer one such strategy. And this strategy helps to formulate your idea in a logical sequence that provides the reviewers an advanced organizer for your argument in the paper. And interestingly, when you try to put your ideas into this scheme, it actually tightens your own logic. And this is the scheme that I'm going to suggest to you, and it follows the principle that successful publishing involves a strong, logical, and tight argument about the importance of your study. So what I suggest that you do when you have an idea for a study, put down an argument that follows these 5 and potentially, if it's relevant, 6 elements. The first thing is define to yourself what the topic of your study is. Are you dealing with peer relationships in the classroom? Are you dealing with textual analysis? Are you dealing with the differential achievement of kids from different groups? What is the topic of the study? And then you need to convince or write support for why this topic is even important. Why should the readers care about the topic of your study? After you defined this topic of the study and why it's important, you review quickly what is generally known about this topic. This is followed by highlighting what is yet not known. What is the knowledge gap in the current literature that, based on the fact that this is an important topic, should be known? And that leads to your research question that needs to tightly tie to this knowledge gap. Your research question then aims to address this knowledge gap that you just identified. If you write a paragraph, if you're able to write a paragraph that captures these 5 elements in a logical and tight way, you provide to yourself and to your readers a very quick advanced organizer of your logical argument. And then you can add about another element at the end that tells the reviewers and your audience the theoretical framework that you're using. I went to the recent issue of the Journal of Educational Psychology, and one of the articles provides an example of such a paragraph that I want to share with you. So this is from an article by Chu and Chow titled Classmate Characteristics and Student Achievement in 33 Countries. This is the introductory paragraph of their study, and I'm going to give you a minute just to read it to yourself. So if you look at this paragraph, it includes all 5 elements of the argument of the scheme I presented before. They start with providing us an indication of what is the topic that they'll be focusing on. Classmates play a significant role in children's behavior and academic achievement. They're talking about classmates and the relation of classmates to students' academic achievement. Then they emphasize why this is important. A student with higher achieving classmates often shows higher academic achievement than does a student with lower achieving classmates. So now we're supposedly convinced that this is actually a worthwhile topic to attend to. And then they tell us, in one sentence, strategically placed, what is known and relevant to their study about in the literature, that these classmates' influences are part of a complex environment system. So this is what is known. There could be another sentence there that would be more informative, but this is what they chose to present. And then they present us the knowledge gap. However, and very often knowledge gaps start with however, because they follow what is known. And then however, this is what is not known. Past studies have not explicated the mechanisms of classmate influence, and they identify another knowledge gap. Furthermore, they have not tested whether these links are universal or different in different countries. So they position the knowledge gap right there in the center, following what is known, and then they present us their research question. Therefore, the present study will do this. It will test how family, classmates, and country characteristics are related to academic achievements. Now, this is something that I just dug out from the last issue of JEP. We can critique it. They don't provide a theory at the end. But the sequence provides an example of how this scheme can be applied. Not many people use this scheme. And sometimes as an editor or as a reviewer, I need to go through until the middle of the introduction in order to really understand what the author is trying to actually do here. So you can be effective in using other schemes, but if you had to exercise one scheme and one strategy in order to tighten your logic to yourself and to your reviewers, I think that this scheme of the 5 points argument is a very useful one. The other thing about the publishing, being successful academic publisher, writer, and this is again something that Anastasia emphasized, you will get feedback from your viewers, you will get suggestions, you will get rejected. Publishing is about a dialogue. You are in dialogue with the editor and with the reviewers. If you got rejected, you need to read the reviews, try to understand what was communicated to you, and don't give up. One of the most unhelpful things that you can do to yourself is to say, oh, this, it just didn't work, I'm giving up on this. I heard people say, oh, I didn't submit to grant proposals. I submitted once and it didn't work, so I gave up on this. Or I'm not publishing anymore. I submitted once and it was rejected and I'm not doing it anymore. You will, throughout your career, continue to get feedback and rejection. This is part of the process of peer reviewing and publishing. So do not give up. What you do want to do is to focus on this audience awareness, on this notion that this is a conversation that you're having with the reviewers, with the editors, about why your manuscript should be published, trying to understand in this collaboration how to make it a product that they will consider to be worthwhile of publishing. So imagine yourself again in the role of the reviewer. You get a manuscript to evaluate, and let's say you think that there's something there, but there's a lot of things that need to be changed. So you recommend revise and resubmit, and the editor decides to adopt this recommendation and ask the author to revise and resubmit. The author revises and also writes what the changes that they made in the manuscript in response to your comments. And the editor then sends it back to you to evaluate again if is the manuscript now worthwhile for has merit and can be published. What kind of communication would you like to get and would you expect from the author who responds to your feedback? And it's very important to imagine the reviewer as your audience when you address their comments. You want to be respectful. You want to consider the fact that they took time to read your manuscript. Even if the tone is not completely constructive, you want to take a deep breath and focus on the content. And when making the changes in writing the letter, you want to make it very easy for the reviewer and the editor to see how you addressed each and every comment that they provided to you. One of the things that are very, very important about the process of publishing is to consider the reviewers and the editor as your collaborators and making it as easy as possible for them to understand your position, be respectful, but to also help them see the changes and how you addressed their comments. So you will provide a letter where you take each comment of a reviewer and say how you responded to it and point to the place in the manuscript where you made the changes in response to this comment. You can also disagree with the reviewer and respectfully explain why you don't think that this comment is necessary. It is about the dialogue and it is about audience awareness. Another point, which is very, very important, almost taken for granted, but people don't necessarily pay attention to it as much as they should. Successful publishing in journals requires following the ethical rules and the professional responsibilities of a scientist. You need to provide citations, acknowledge others' ideas that you built on. If you use verbatim quotes, you need to provide the quotation marks and the page number. You clearly do not plagiarize. And you try to avoid verbatim as much as possible and use your own words. If you cite an article, read it. Don't rely on other people, citing other people as an indication of what's there. Follow the requirements of the institutional review boards for research, and follow the instructions in the journals. You want to be very attentive to what the journal's limitations are, if they have a word limit, if they have a particular structure, and very, very important, proofread. It's being an editor, I can tell you firsthand that manuscripts that have a lot of typos are much more likely to be rejected, regardless of the ideas that are in them. So proofreading is extremely important. And to go back to the point that Anastasia brought in at the beginning, you need to be planful, and you need to understand your context and your environment, both in the position of a graduate student who's writing a dissertation proposal and a dissertation, and definitely when you move to the tenure track position, find out what kind of writing is expected of you. How much are you expected to publish? Which journals are you expected to publish in? What kind of grant agencies are valued in your institution? Map out the terrain of your writing tasks so that you can set goals that are appropriate for you, and plan your writing effectively. Thank you.
These two presentations were really helpful. We turned our camera off for a moment, and I'm going to start it back. So let's give them a round of applause. There you go. Now you can actually hear us.
We're streaming and also unmuted.
I'm going to mute Ball State. I think they had an unmuted mic. So thank you both for those very helpful presentations. We had our mics off, but we were saying things back to you or giving an amen to some of the statements that you made. So we now enter kind of part two of our discussion, and so I'm going to change our camera or view to a discussion view so that we can see each other a little bit better. So I hope that shows up for everybody. And now we have the chance to engage with you for the next 40 minutes or so in a frank discussion about what the writing process is like. And we ask students to submit to us in advance questions that they might have about the writing process. And so I'd like to begin with Anastasia, who talked a lot about the importance of self-regulation in the writing process. I especially liked what you said about writing being a lonely enterprise, because it really is. I want to ask you personally, and Avi, feel free to answer also after Anastasia, but students want to know if there's a best writing routine. And I've always wanted to know this too. I remember asking a number of people who are much better writers than I am, what they do in the morning. Like, do you wake up early? Do you write first? How do you prioritize? So is there a best routine? Long blocks of time? You mentioned 2 hours is your personal limit, but I'm wondering what you might recommend.
It's critical, first of all, because a novice writer is usually all over the place and writes off in all directions at once. So therefore, setting goals and having some specific strategies that will enable you to write and monitor your writing activities more selectively and effectively will help you become a better writer. So I would say, do not let a week or two slip by Give your writing a priority over everything else you do. And write in the morning. Get up in the morning and do your writing while your brain is still fresh. Okay, go to the library if you can find a quiet place in your own house, or lock yourself in a room. Block that time out every morning at the same time. And also work on the weekends too. That works well for me. We had spring break this week. Treat spring break, that's what I tell my students, summers, even holidays sometimes, as uninterrupted research time, rather than an opportunity to go on vacation. Work hard and in a very organized fashion. Okay, we have a personal life, but writing has to be your #1 priority especially in our case as in academia.
Question to Avi, just would you tell us a little bit about your own personal routine and what you recommend to your students?
Yeah, I wish I was as organized as Anastasia. Maybe I would have been productive. I think that Anastasia says we have a life, and we do in different circumstances, of course, call for different strategies. I think that one figures out when one writes best. Some of us are early morning people, some of us are late people, some of us are early morning people, but then we have kids, so the mornings are just short unless you want to get up at 4:30 in the morning, which I actually have colleagues who do. They wake up at 4:30 in the morning in order to write a couple of hours before the kids get up and need to be have to go to school. Some of us write late at night. Some of us can write in the office. I can't write in the office. If I'm continuously interrupted in the office, so I write at home. I think one thing to take from Anastasia's points, which is critical, is to treat writing almost as sacred. So writing is like you're in a meeting with the president of the university, right? Say, okay, I'm going to close these 2 hours to write. There are no interruptions. I mean, the phone rings. You need to treat it like a very important meeting that you cannot interrupt. And so bringing the writing to a high status in your agenda and put it in your calendar. These 2 hours I'm writing. It's closed. I'm not doing anything else. But the other thing that Anastasia said, which I think is very important, is once you get to know yourself and your habits, and which actually, by the way, along my career, they have changed. When I was a graduate student, I could write for hours, no end. I would sit and I would write, sit down in the morning and get up for a quick lunch, sit down, and that would write for the whole day, basically. I cannot do that anymore. It's important to rejuvenate yourself. So learn about yourself, and you don't want to get burnt out from writing, and experiment. Try different strategies. Try to writing for 50 minutes and then take a 10-minute break, and then write for another 50 minutes and then a 10-minute break. Try to write for 2 hours, take a half-an-hour break. Vary the way you write. So I, for example, found recently, something that happened with age, I guess, that it's good for me to write sitting down, and then actually I arranged like a stand-up desk. So after a while, I actually write standing up for a little bit, just to vary, to give my body rest from just sitting, which is apparently unhealthy. So I actually read about a very successful author who would write only 3 hours a day, and Anastasia is writing 2 hours, so that's sort of like, it seems to be approximately a good amount of time. But he was writing only 3 hours a day and writing 50 minutes and taking 10 minutes break, and was extremely productive. It's very hard sometimes to say, oh, but I have another couple of hours. Maybe I should plug in more writing there, but it can actually be counterproductive eventually. It's sort of like sleep. You say, oh, I will not sleep because sleep is wasteful time, except that if you don't sleep, you become much less productive. So, for example, if you know that the writing time is limited, you're going to be more productive during this limited time than if you know, oh, I have all day, and then you dilly-dally and then say, oh, I have all day, let me also clean the kitchen while I'm writing. So, but experiment, try different things in order to learn what works for you. And I don't know that there is an optimal sequence of writing or strategy, time management strategy for each person. What I think is generalized is that you need to find the one that works for you. And putting writing as a high priority activity alongside, or even more so than many other things that you do, is what is required to be a successful writer.
When you get one student wrote, what happens when you get writer's block, where you really feel stuck as a writer, and you both talked about the importance of motivation, as good motivation scholars do, and the importance of self-efficacy, but sometimes, let's face it, we just get into a rut in terms of writing and feel stuck. Writer's block. What to do about that? Anastasia?
That setting high standards can help writers improve their quality of the writing, right? But such standard setting, high standards, can also inhibit an individual's word fluency if they become unreasonable. And so when your standards are excessive, this could be a major source of what we call a writer's block. So what would be the solution in this case? In my case, I take a long walk. But you would probably need to lower the standards when your fluency is dropped. So, for example, I would say delay your writing quality, your writing quality judgments until after you have generated some text, and then go back, give yourself some time, engage in a revision process, and try to see if your writing output meets your standards. That's basically what works for me, but I agree with Avi that you need to look at yourself and look at the strategies you have available and try different ways to see what would work best for you as a writer.
I think that people experience writer blocks for different reasons. I think that part of what Anastasia says is absolutely right, that we're overwhelmed either by the product that we are expected to produce or by the standards that we hold ourselves to or we think others hold us to. And I think that I find several strategies to be helpful. One, when the product is very overwhelming, and the overwhelming product can be 5-page paper for class can be sometimes overwhelming also, but definitely a dissertation is overwhelming, or a literature review is overwhelming. In these cases, I would recommend breaking the task down to very, very small pieces. And if you need help with that, go to your mentor and say, okay, I need to write this dissertation proposal, or I need to write a proposal and I feel overwhelmed. Work with somebody who can help you, who is experienced, to scaffold the writing, to bring it down to very, very small chunks. Okay, and then you set yourself very, very specific and proximal goals that are easier to manage. So you say, for today, I'm just going to write one paragraph, and this paragraph is going to be about this. I'm just going to review this article that is relevant to my dissertation. And I'm going to write an annotation of this. And so by setting very, very manageable proximal goals for writing that you get immediate feedback on, you enhance your self-efficacy and things, you see progress, which enhances your motivation to continue. And I think that the other thing that Anastasia is very important is don't expect your sentences to come out perfectly with the first try. It's more important actually to produce writing than to produce quality writing right up front, because you will revise and you will get feedback and you revise again. So just I guess to emphasize, to re-emphasize what Anastasia said, you need just make yourself right, disregarding the standard in order to, with the knowledge that you'll go back to revisit it.
Those are very helpful. You can actually see the UK students taking notes while you're saying these things. I just told them to do that. How about balance? So often we find ourselves with multiple demands on our time, and some students raise questions about balancing the dual demands on them, whether those demands be coursework assignments and producing an article for publication, or something their advisor's telling them to do and working on a manuscript for publication, or should I work on a grant project or should I write an article? How do I balance teaching if I'm a TA and also a writing routine? So how would you, what would you suggest about balance?
Our students in my institution, they also teach primarily undergraduate courses. Teaching is usually connected to our research, and so my advice would be to use your research to inform your teaching practices. So when you teach, you learn twice. You learn about teaching and you learn about I would say, in terms of grants, ask yourself, is it really time to write a grant? Maybe it's premature. Should you write the paper first on the topic you're interested in and then focus on the grant? Should writing a grant will lead to a literature review paper? So you got to be strategic about the decisions you make. The advice I have for you is plan ahead and do not rush. Give yourself, I would say, 2 to 3 months to prepare the paper, whether it's a paper for publication or whether it's a paper for a proposal for a grant. It takes time. It won't happen overnight. And then you'll get disappointed when nothing is working out. Also, I would arrange with other classmates or other mentors you have or advisors to review a first draft of your specific aims of whatever you're trying to focus on as early as possible. I would say 6 weeks or so, just to make sure you're on the mark. Receiving feedback from others is really important. Also, if you want to write a grant, I would say you need to establish some partnerships with other institutions, and in some cases with K through 12 schools if you're interested in a grant that involves K through 12 students. And when you write the paper, like Avi said earlier, or a grant proposal, you have to make sure that the project fits the guidelines. So again, you need to plan in advance, and you need to determine what is good for you. What are your goals? And remember, you gotta hone in, and you can't multitask. So you gotta make sure you have one goal in mind, you stick to that goal, and once you have accomplished this goal, you move on to the next one. So also, we all of us have families, and don't forget to pay attention to your family. So, and keep your promises.
If you, in one of the slides that Anastasia presented, there was this matrix of tasks and months. And I think that one of the best or the most important thing about balancing is time management. And it's something that one learns, and it changes also when your expertise and the type of tasks you engage in change. But I think that what you want to have is you want to prioritize your tasks. So you say, okay, I have teaching and I have writing. What are the priorities? How much of the time that I have available to me am I dedicating to this and to that at this particular stage in my career or in my graduate student role? And you need to map out, and then again consult with your mentors about what's appropriate, what would be the good strategy to take in this selection and prioritizing of goals at this stage in light of your career aspirations. So you map out what the tasks that you want to engage yourself in, and then you look at your calendar and you say, okay, I have my family, and I have my friends, and I have these activities, and I have writing, and I have teaching. As you learn yourself, you realize how much time you can dedicate to each activity. So when I think about my week, I teach 2 classes, and I know I need that day before I teach the class in order to prepare. So these times are blocked for preparing for teaching. And I say, well, I have these writing projects, and I know that writing a chapter or writing a manuscript takes me such and such, and I find places in my calendar to say these couple of weeks I'm focusing on writing this project, and you plug in into your calendar, because you otherwise you'll feel the conflict continuously. And even when planning the calendar, you feel the conflict continuously. But at least things seem more manageable. And when you become more realistic, you can also then be more planful about taking on other tasks or saying no. And, and it'll be completely legitimate if you're a new assistant professor and the department chair comes to you and says, well, I want you to take this task as well. And you come with your calendar and you'll say, well, here's my calendar. I actually cannot, in the next 3 months, I cannot dedicate time to this. And for yourself as well, there are, as academics, there are a lot of tempting opportunities that come our way. And it's very hard to say no. If you have your calendar in front of you, it becomes clearer that you need to be realistic. And if you bring in something new and you don't have the time, something else will have to give. So prioritizing, deciding what you're going to focus on, balancing the various domains that you need to attend to in your role in a mindful way that also addresses your knowledge of yourself and how long things take is a very important strategy. And then I think that what Anastasia said is very important. When you have these different tasks, try to see how they support each other, how you can align the goals of the different tasks in the different domains so that they promote each other, and that's a great idea.
That's really good. I hear what you're both saying, the importance of putting writing on your calendar as a meeting. And I liked what you said, consider it as important as a meeting with the president. You wouldn't interrupt that. If it were a meeting with or even someone you cherish, you wouldn't interrupt that. And so we almost have to put writing in as a block on our calendar and consider it, sacred, as you said, and that will help prioritize. And as you said, Avi, I would just second the idea that it helps us to say no. Before I started putting writing time on my calendar, I just said yes to everything. Can you meet with me then? Sure. Can you meet with me now? Yeah. And then I would never get my writing done. So I think that's really great advice. We're going by questions that were submitted, but a couple have come in from people who are on the webinar now, and they wanted to know whether you differentiate in your writing time data analysis and the other tasks involved in preparing a study. So would we call 2 hours in SPSS running statistics a part of our writing time or not?
for me as writing time unless I'm writing the results. Analyzing data is just another task that I need to do, but writing for me involves taking those results, the data, and writing the results section and then interpreting what these results mean and focusing on the discussion section.
You just got a collective dang it from the students at Kentucky. And I think that must reflect the fact that we can easily hide behind data analysis and get mired down, and it gives us some rewards in a different way that the writing process really doesn't. So maybe, we kind of want to call that writing, but I would agree with you, Anastasia, that it's kind of a different thing to sit down and craft prose than it is to make tables.
But I think that when you imagine a research paper, the research paper has different stages, the different parts. And I think that in the table, in your calendar, you can actually, when you say, okay, I'm going to write a research paper, then you can, in your calendar, say, okay, these days I'm doing data analysis, these days I'm writing the introduction, these days I'm writing the discussion. But I would give another suggestion. As you analyze, write the results. So what I found to be effective is I'm going to run some statistical analyses. Before I run the analyses, I write the first paragraph of the results section, and as I analyze and I look at the analysis, I already plug in the findings. And so this way, the writing and running the analyses do not necessarily constitute such separate tasks and can support each other. So the same thing, by the way, for qualitative analyses.
Well, let's spend a little bit of Let's spend a little bit of time talking about preparing for publication. Avi, I know that you're a journal editor, and both of you have had a lot of experience as reviewers. How do we know when a study is good enough to publish? I mean, part of our problem, I think, in getting things out might be that internal editor that is always saying, not good enough yet, not quite there. On the other hand, sometimes we send things out that have no business going out yet. So how do we know? What are some good markers of when a piece is ready to go out?
And as early scholars, it's very important to develop when a manuscript is good enough to go out. And manuscripts do not need to be perfect to go out, but they need to be pretty solid. And again, it depends on which journal you're writing to. But by the way, one thing about publishing, and I know that this may come up as a question later, but there is a surge of new journals now coming out. And I want to caution a lot of our graduate students who are likely to get email from somebody who will say, oh, this journal, we invite you to submit to our journals your manuscript. You should be aware that there's a lot of entrepreneurs who are now trying to recruit authors because the model of publishing is changing, and there's a lot of emphasis now on open access. So you will be lured to submit your manuscript. They will provide you wonderful review and accept, and then you'll say, yes, I want to publish this. And then they'll say, well, give us the $3,000 that it'll cost to publish it. And the journal is unfamiliar, unknown. You don't know the quality. So be very cautious in where you submit your manuscripts. In order to know whether your manuscript is ready, what you need is, first of all, to read manuscripts in that journal and see what kind of articles are being written. And in the process, you need mentorship. So use your advisors. Ask them to read your manuscript and say, is it ready to submit? I think that part of what, so the LNU highlighted both ends of the concern. Is it not good enough when it actually can be sent already? This is something that your mentor should provide you advice about. And is it ready when it isn't? Actually, you need to be very cautious in making this judgment. And again, your advisors are probably the best people, as well as your peers. I think that the other thing that can help very much in developing the gauge about the readiness of a manuscript is becoming a reviewer yourself. And if you join your advisor in reviewing manuscripts that the advisor is asked to review, you see what is sent, and some of what is sent is, as an editor, I engage in what's called desk reject. So every manuscript that is sent to my journal, I go over it. And if something is really subpar, I don't even send it to be reviewed. But even those that are sent to be reviewed, some of them are not written particularly well, or the argument is not completely tight, and helping in reviewing such manuscripts helps you develop the sense of, okay, this is ready to go.
Avi, how can we become reviewers as students? How can students become reviewers for a journal like the Journal of Experimental Education, or doing that?
I'll talk about journals in a minute. I'll start with conferences. You can start your graduate student reviewing career in conferences. You can review conference proposals. And ARA, I know that the Motivation SIG and Division C have a graduate student reviewer status. So that's a very good thing to join in. And it also gets you service credits that you need to, that is one of the criteria by which academics are evaluated. In terms of journals, some journals have also a graduate student reviewer status. For example, Journal of Ed Psych, you cannot review by yourself, but you can review with your mentor and then be acknowledged. People who submit reviews to the Journal of Educational Psychology, you're asked, did you have a graduate student helping you in reviewing this? And then you can put the graduate student name. So that's something, again, you can get mentorship from your advisor and recognition from the journal. In Journal of Experimental Education, we sometimes ask students to, we don't have a formal status, but I will either in consultation with the student's advisor, or sometimes when I know the student well and know the quality of their expertise, the level of their expertise, I will use them as graduate students, as independent graduate student reviewers, in addition to the reviewers that I would normally ask. I think it's an educational, important educational opportunity. So that's what we provide here. I wonder about contemporary ed psych. I think that in contemporary ed psych, they don't have a formal student reviewer status, but I know for me, I work with my students on reviewing such manuscripts, and then when I submit it, I list in the comments, here are the have helped in reviewing this manuscript. And as an editor, when I respond to authors, I say, here are the reviews, and here's a graduate student review. It holds slightly different status, but it's a very, very important opportunity. And again, start with your mentor. Start doing this with the scaffolding by your advisor. Another thing to do, by the way, there's more and more resources by publishers about reviewing. And what are the criteria for reviews, and what authors should look for in submitting the articles, because that's these are the criteria that the reviewers are looking for. So both in Elsevier and Taylor and Francis, these big academic publishers, and Sage actually have reviewer resources that explicate what the reviewing structure is, what is expected from a review, and this can be very, very helpful.
I imagine those would be helpful also for authors to read, because you could read about the criteria by which your manuscript will be evaluated. Anastasia, just to jump off of what Avi said, he's talking about the importance of having someone else read your work, and some students asked us what the etiquette is for reaching out to someone to read our work when we're working on it. How do we go about asking other scholars for feedback or
I would
each other
say,
for feedback?
don't just call someone out of the blue and ask for feedback. You will need to make contact with that person. You'll need to know his area of expertise, and you can do that via the phone or via email. Nowadays, you can write an email and say, well, I've read your research. I'm interested in your area, and I'm writing a paper that is very similar to what you're writing, so would you be willing to give me a feedback? So be forthcoming without being pushy. And like I said earlier, most researchers are lonely, so they would love to hear from you. I had a student who contacted Albert Bandura once via email asking for some feedback, and there he was. He responded within an hour. The student was really thrilled to hear from him. So once you receive that feedback, be open-minded and take their feedback into consideration, and thank them, and thank them again when you see them at the conference. Like Avi said, do go to conferences, become members of Division 15 or other SIGs in your own area, ARA, and go to these conferences and meet these people, and then make contact with these researchers, and eventually, once you get to know them a little bit, know their expertise, then you can approach them and ask them for feedback. I had the opportunity to meet some students that way, particularly at APA, and then I received either an outline of a paper that we're interested in or a manuscript, and I was happy to give them feedback, because that's how we learn too.
Okay, now I'll turn toward a more difficult question for both of you that's perhaps a little harder, and students have been asking about two things. What is the role of a conceptual or theoretical framework in writing? And how do we link that framework to our findings, to the broader literature and the discussion? So let's just start with that one, and then a follow-up will be addressing the literature review itself.
The conceptual framework.
So what is the role of the conceptual or theoretical
framework? It gives you directions. It gives you direction to the study. And it also supports and informs your research. So it's a key part of your design process. And it should explain the relationship, at least the presumed relationship, among the key variables, the key concepts, the key factors in your study. So I would say that the conceptual framework is a bit like a recipe, right? Like a blueprint, if you will. And it will help you position your work within a larger area of research you're interested in. And it will also help you ensure that your research stays on track. Because as you review related research and discuss your findings, you need to relate it back to your conceptual framework. So I would say conduct a literature review, and your framework should introduce the relevant research and show how your work will help advance research in the area you're interested in. The conceptual framework could take the form of a diagram or a graphic, but doesn't have to be that way. You can present your conceptual framework just by writing a narrative. What I would say you should keep in mind is that you can revise your conceptual framework if necessary. So it's an evolving document. So the conceptual frameworks are not fixed in stone. And you can do that based on the findings, your findings, or other findings in the literature as you review the literature.
Very helpful. And Avi, if you will follow up to that and with anything that you want to add, and also address how do you organize or recommend that we organize the many references that we're coming across. So there's this whole literature, I'm studying achievement goal orientation, and I'm finding your work everywhere and all these other people, and it's very confusing. How do I keep that organized to help me when I sit down to write a literature review on all of that stuff?
Conceptual framework and then what it means to the literature review. When I think about a conceptual framework, I think about different levels. So there's the overall paradigm, if you will. What are the general assumptions that I have about the phenomena that I'm interested in understanding and studying? Do I think that they're fixed out there? Do I think that this is meaning making that people are constructing? Do they do it individually? Do they do it in groups? I mean, it's like through social interactions. There are different paradigmatic assumptions. And then there are the theoretical frameworks that I can work with. So these are the concepts and their relations. For example, achievement goal theory or self-efficacy, the social cognitive theory. And these sit within these more general paradigms. And what they provide you, the researcher, is a community of practice. As Anastasia said, they're like tools to think with about phenomena of interest. And what these help you is to locate yourself as a scholar within a particular community of scholars. How to decide where to focus and how to use this conceptual tool, I would send you back to the scheme that I described to you. So if you say, okay, this is the topic I'm interested in, and this is why it's important. Now, what is known about this topic? Now, what is known about a topic can be enormous. You don't review everything that is known. What you do is you focus on a particular set of literature and the main knowledge claims that can be made from this literature that are relevant to your interest. And the conceptual framework or the theory can help guide your lens on describing what is known. What is known about this phenomenon from people who used this particular theory. And this will also help you identify what is not known yet, which is the knowledge gap that you want to address in your research. So describing what is known and then pointing to what is not known is not about everything regarding this topic. It's strategic, and it comes from this conceptual framework, from the theory, the literature that use this theoretical perspective. And then your literature review follows that. So when you review the literature review is not everything that has to do with this particular topic, but it's the literature review that explicates what is known relative to what you emphasize is known, and then again reviewed strategically to highlight the knowledge gap that you want to address in your study. The way this paragraph, 5-element paragraph is written, it's not linear. You don't necessarily start always with the topic and then what is known, and then you identify what is not known. Sometimes you say, oh, this is a very interesting question, right, that I want to find out. And then you go to the literature to find out, is it already known or not? And then you realize, oh, when I went to the literature and started exploring, I realized that some of it was tested or investigated and some of it not. So by your reading of the literature and your conversation with other scholars, it gets fine-tuned. And then you go back and you write what is known in a more strategic way, again, to highlight what is not known, to lead to your new research question. And as you revise it, again, it changes a little bit in order for eventually to come up with this logical scheme that guides your research. And then your research, this, again, logical scheme is sort of like a blueprint to the literature review that you need to conduct in order to flesh out this argument that you just built. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. That's great. I think that's really helpful because I think that can be one of the most challenging aspects of writing for many students, for even, you know,
I will add one thing.
professors.
This is wisdom from one of
Anastasia,
my
do you use
graduate
anything?
students.
Oh, yeah.
I brought a former graduate student of mine to talk to my current graduate students, and some of them asked him, how did you know when you wrote your dissertation that you can stop the literature review? And he said, when I read, oh, there was a new article that came out about this topic, and I knew all the citations. So when you read and you say, oh, yes, they cite the people that I've reviewed already. Oh, yes, they cite the people I've reviewed already. There's some kind of a saturation that you achieve that you can say, okay, I know enough of the lay of the literature in order to complete my review.
Right. Yeah, that's great. That's great. Anastasia and Avi, do you use anything to organize the articles you come across when you're doing a literature review? Some people use EndNote, some people use other things. Do you have any recommendations?
Our institution uses Zotero, which is another software, and I find it very useful because it keeps track of all the articles you have reviewed over the years. And so you can organize it also by topic. So if you're doing a literature review on self-efficacy, you have all your articles related to that. If you're doing a literature review on goal setting or strategy use or self-evaluation. So organizing it by topic may be useful as well.
Avi, do you use one?
I had in my office file cabinets with all the articles organized by numbers of them. And then I had a document where they went by number with all the citations. It was unbelievable. And when I moved internationally, I had to ship all these file cabinets. And today we have things like Zotero and EndNote. I find one of the best ones that I found is Mendeley. And Mendeley is very good. That's what you use, so you know it. I mean, it's lovely because you can actually take the PDF, drop it in Mendeley, and it extracts all the information into the citation. And I think one of the things about these, both I think Zotero, EndNote, Mendeley, they will format your reference list based on the format that you seek, if it's APA or MLA or Chicago. These are useful not just for keeping track of the article, but also to generate reference lists.
Good suggestions. I want to ask, we only have time for about one or two more questions, and one comes from Tricia, who's in the room with me right now. And Tricia wants to know, how do you develop a strong academic voice? So kind of shifting voices from the way we learned to be writers to kind of the scholarly academic voice. you go, Tricia. That should solve everything.
I highly encourage my students to submit their work and submit their work solo sometimes. And network. So when you go to the conference, you talk to other graduate students from other institutions, you get to see some of the most well-known researchers in your field, and they get to know you, and eventually, you know, once you receive what you need on the presentations you make, then you can start focusing on publishing. I always tell my students, for every presentation you make, you should find a home for your research. You should publish it. So you shouldn't present something and just leave it on the shelf. You should find a home for that research. And that's how you start developing a voice in our world. And it's a small world, especially in our field.
Of our identity. And so what Anastasia is saying, you know, come to conferences, join the community, start networking with other people, establishing who you are as a scholar. But I think that another important thing about voice is to have a framework to think with. So I think that once you start thinking about phenomena from a comprehensive framework, it helps you organize your view of the world and of research, and it provides you conceptual and tools and terminology to speak with others or with others who think the same way, or to others who have a different perspective, and then you can appropriate this conceptual framework and terms in order to describe your views, your beliefs, the findings of your research, your scholarly identity.
Serena.
Becoming like productive and creative and inspiring writer. There's so much to learn, and it's a lifelong process. And I would like to thank you, our wonderful panelists, one more time. Can we give a hand? Thank you so much for everybody for making this happen, and this was a wonderful opportunity for all of us to engage in this important conversation. Hope that we can continue this conversation in the coming year. Thank you so much, Avi and Anastasia. Thank you, Ellen and Wade. Thank you, everybody.